Oh, good.
Yeah, yeah. So now I remember. So, okay. So, all
Start
right,
over.
start over now. No, we don't. So, we started with the why we search for God, and then we had a great session on the rational proofs of God, and then we had the spiritual proofs of the kingdom come, which were largely prophecy. And Carrie, I did put it up on YouTube, and it's gotten 25 views so far. So
Oh, that is so wonderful, Tom.
yeah, well, thank you for sort of pushing me in that direction.
Sure.
So, so today this is one of my favorite topics is to talk about our spiritual teachers,
Uh,
and so this should be a lot of fun. We'll do that, and then next time the thought is we'll talk about the sort of Baha'i practices and what we've learned along the way, and what we may share with others. And then what I think is among the more profound things to talk about is the spiritual gifts and confirmations part, which is next on our agenda. And then pioneering and service and spiritual challenges and then commitments. So
ah,
that's sort of our roadmap. And again, so I'm recording these and then we'll put these up on YouTube, and we'll see how it goes. So cool.
sounds good.
Yeah, and so if you're on YouTube, if you if you want to find it, hold on. If you want to find it, just type in spiritual stories step, and you'll be able to find us. So
Right.
okay, there is one residual prophecy that I forgot to tell you guys, but it's such a cool prophecy that I thought I would go ahead and share it with you just to sort of get us started. It's a prophecy to how to know that we're in the end times. And so that's, I mean, it should be obvious from anyone that watches the news, frankly. But
I,
but this is sort of it. So the book of Daniel, we talked a fair bit about last time around. And in the book of Daniel, at the end, there's an angel that appears. And he says, at that time, the time of the end of the age, Michael, the angel, will stand up. The prince stand for the children of thy people, and there shall be a time of trouble, such as never was since there was a nation, even to the same time. And at that time, thy people shall be delivered, every one that shall be found written in the book. And it says, and many of them that sleep in the dust of the earth shall awake, some to everlasting life, and some to shame and everlasting contempt. And then, and they that be wise shall shine as the brightness of the firmament, and they that turn many to righteousness as the stars forever and ever. And that was pretty matter of fact, but check out this very last verse. But thou, O Daniel, shut up the words and seal the book, even to the time of the end. Many shall run to and fro, and knowledge shall be increased. So check this out. You think about those last 11 words, oddly referring to a state of transportation and the spread of knowledge, which is what many shall run to and fro, and knowledge shall be increased. And then observe now that from the time of Daniel, which was 2,500 years ago, until the time of Baha'u'llah, the fastest mode of transportation was the horse for all that period of time. And that the world's knowledge, the sum of it, could be stuck in a library, which you'd have to go to and access. And consider that what has happened in the transportation and knowledge since the coming of Baha'u'llah. I mean, it's just astounding, what has happened since that. So now you have an idea about the power of the revelation when Baha'u'llah unsealed the books, and you have proof that we are living in the end times and that it's time to wake up and shine. So there's a little bit, to me, those last 11 words were just so profound and so right on about the changes and transformations we've seen since the time of Baha'u'llah, when the time from going from a single library and a horse to spaceships and computers and all knowledge accessible in an instant through a computer. So I did want to just share that little remaining proof on that. So that brings us to today's fun task. Oh, there's my daughter, Sar. Hey, Vidar. She's traveling somewhere or another. And oh, good, and Constantine. That's lovely.
What country is she in?
She's in the country of Northern California. Very good. Okay, so now here's the fun part, and I thought we would share some stories about those who contributed to our spiritual growth and development in the faith. And in some previous sessions, and even the live sessions that we had face to face before we started the internet version of this, we heard some great stories from some of the people that are often here. But I have many stories, but I know for a fact that you guys have some great stories. And so I'm really anxious to hear, some of the stories that you have. So, and Carrie, I know you know everybody. So,
Well, gosh. Well, I was thinking about my spiritual story, and it bleeds over into confirmations, which it sounds like you want to talk about later. But my biggest spiritual story, I suppose, came when I was about a 3-year-old Baha'i. I became a Baha'i in Phoenix, Arizona in 1970. And I had wonderful spiritual parents, Murph and I. We both became Baha'is at the same time together. But this wonderful couple, Ray and Mabel Helmick from Phoenix, they're both, of course, in FA right now, but they had the most incredible firesides in Phoenix. And we used to go twice a week for a solid year, every Tuesday and every Thursday night. And their fireside was so wonderful that, Hands of the Cause came there to their fireside. So I would often be sitting there and we'd be deeping in on something or teaching seekers or singing songs and just having a wonderful, wonderful time. And I would look up and there would be Hugo Giacari and Dr. Mahajer would come in, and just these amazing mentors. So that was part of this rich Phoenix world of 1970. But in talking to Mabel one day, somehow we got to talking about spiritual experiences, and she said, well, you can have a spiritual experience. And I said, oh, really? And what do I do? And she said, well, just ask. Just ask. And I said, you mean I can ask like Abdul Baha to come talk to me? And she said, oh, sure. Well, so sure enough, I did. And over the next couple of years, I thought about it, and then I finally said, well, I'm going to ask him. So I did, and he came to me in a dream. And of course, I can't remember what he said. But then when I got to Atlanta in 1973, which is where I met you, Tom, I actually had the nerve to ask him again to come visit. Well, this time he came to our apartment in Woodlake, which you came to when you were a seeker. And it was the most wonderful thing, except that he was very tired. It was like I had asked him and he came, and then I asked him again, which of course was terribly selfish of me. But it felt so natural, because when he came the first time, it just was so natural. So this time he had that, that picture where he's lined, his face is real lined, and he looks real tired.
Yes.
So he sat in our green velvet chair there in Woodlake, which was a gift from my mother-in-law, and he spoke to me. Well, he spoke to me in Farsi, and I understood every word. And he was telling me the secrets of the universe. I mean, this was just an amazing thing as he sat there being very tired. So he's talking and it's absolutely wonderful. And I understand all the Farsi. And then as I begin to wake up, the Farsi turns to dribble. I don't understand a word of it. I've been a Baha'i for 50 years and I have never learned Farsi. So there I was, and I thought, wow. So he told me the secrets of the universe and in Farsi, and then as I woke up, I lost it. I had no idea what he said. And that, so I thought, of course, well, what was this about? What's my lesson, in having presumed to ask Al-Baha not once but twice to come see me. So it didn't take long for me to understand that what he was saying to me was, look, I could tell you the secrets of the universe, but you aren't ready. Just live your life. And trust me, you will discover all that I've told you. Just be patient, live your life, live the faith, do the job. And so as it turned out, my life evolved completely out of my control, that I became actually a science teacher. And I studied, all the sciences to teach Earth, space science and evolution and biology and all these wonderful things. So what this was sort of a guidance for me for the arc of my life, because here I was teaching the secrets of the universe to my students for 25 years as I learned them, and everything turned out just as he said it would turn out, that I would just live my life, I would be guided, I would be assisted, and that's been my life for 50 years.
Wow, what a great
and I've never asked him again to come visit me.
He's very busy, Carrie.
Very busy, and nobody knows that more than I.
I mean, you've been hogging him for twice now. That's enough.
I know.
Okay. Well, who else has a story to share? I know you do. Tell us about those that really helped you develop and deepen your faith and things like that. Karen, is that you speaking? You need to yeah, okay, now you're unmuted, yeah.
Am I unmuted?
Yeah.
My search always had to do with who's God and what is God. And when I found the Baha'i faith, it came as close as I could get. I had first sent for some information when I was still in high school. And I got some pamphlets and everything sounded great, except there was God in there. And it was like, yeah, that's okay, but they believe in God. So later for that one. And when I was in Atlanta, I was just after my daughter was born, and I was feeling very alone and really needing something. And my husband's family was Southern Baptist. And I went to the only Jewish temple in Atlanta, and that I knew didn't fit. And I started searching. And so I looked in the phone book and I got a phone number, and it was Estelle Lindsay, Estelle and Raymond Lindsay. And she said, well, I'll be glad to send you some literature. And I said, no, I need to talk to somebody in person right away. And she sent over somebody. I got a phone call a few hours later, and there was Bobby Stallings Huffman, who, I don't remember that we even talked about the Baha'i faith when she came over. We just became immediate friends. And I think she was fairly new, and the only book that she had to loan me was Gleanings. And I got Gleanings, and I think I read through it in one night, or I thought I had. And I knew I needed to know more. And I started studying with the Lindsays, and I had been a teenager in California and all about the Jesus movement, and I kept waiting for that saved experience that everybody talked about. I was waiting for lightning bolts and thunder or something to just shout out and tell me this was it. And it just didn't happen. It just didn't happen. And Raymond Lindsay was a remarkable, remarkable person. And I started going to firesides and meeting other Baha'is, and I knew I liked everything about it. And the idea of saying prayers from a prayer book was just too strange. But finally, it was the very first prayer, the one that says, intone the verses, intone, O my servants. And that one finally got me. It finally got me. It was like, okay, there wasn't going to be any thunderbolts or lightning bolts or anything that I was expecting, that Christ was going to come on the clouds or anything like that. And I just finally said, okay, I just know this is it. And I became a Baha'i there with Raymond and Estelle Lindsay and the Cummings. And I think Rama and Aubrey were there. Very few people, there's so few that are left from that original group.
Well,
And
what was the year, Karen?
1971, I think, 70 or 71. Yeah. Sarah was born in 70, and she was still a baby chewing on. They had a little room at Suburban Plaza, a little room that they rented as a Baha'i center. And they had a model of the temple, a little plaster model that sat in the middle of the table. And we just sat in that little room and talked most of the time. And it was marvelous. And I just knew it was true. And then after I declared, then the confirmations started to come. And it was wonderful. And I remember that. And it makes me sad now because I don't have any Baha'is around me. And it's just hard. It's just hard. I remember those days as being really, really special. And I'm kind of looking for a reconnection.
Karen, I want to say that thing about the confirmations came after your leap of faith really rings true with me. And I think probably with a lot of people, and it's exactly what the writings say. So yeah, cool. What a lovely story. Thank you so much. So I have stories, but I want to hear from others if they have stories that they want to share.
I would be happy to say a few things. I have actually never searched for any religion or searched for God like you all talk about. I never searched for it. I was never interested in any religion whatsoever. But somehow I was just talking to Arifa, my wife, about how my life apparently has been directed by so many people and so many events that there was no way I could avoid what I became and how I found the Baha'i faith. But one thing that stand out for me was before I became Baha'i, I went to a prayer meeting, for goodness sake, a prayer meeting. That was very strange for me, being a Dane and talking about religion and prayer. Oh my gosh. Anyway, this lady who was a dear Baha'i in Denmark, her husband was not a Baha'i, but she was, and been for many years. She said, okay, let's go to this room and talk, say some prayers. And we prayed, and we said some prayers, and she made me say some prayers. And during these prayers that were said in this room one day, I'm looking up in the corner behind her, and I see this image, black and white or gray image, a distinguished old gentleman with some device on his head. I do not know what it was at that time. Long white beard, and it was very strange. It was a beautiful picture, beautiful picture. So when we were finished with prayers, I said to her, "This is what I saw. I saw this image of this old man up there." And she said, "Well, there is no image." I said, "I know there is no image, but that's what I saw." She said, "Describe it for me." Now I get goosebumps. It was Abdul Baha.
Hmm.
I had no clue.
Wow.
I never seen or heard about anyone called Abdul Baha. I never
Oh.
seen any picture of him, but I saw.
That's
That
wonderful.
was amazing to me. And I see the room now. I see where it is. It's just so vivid for me.
Mm.
That was just before I became Baha'i.
Wow.
Oh,
What a beautiful
Wow.
story, Klaus.
Klaus, was he looking at you, or was he just there?
Yeah, I think he was probably looking in the room towards me. I think so. It was not just looking somewhere. It was obvious that the person was there and looking into the room where we were sitting.
Hmm. Wow, that's
So,
wonderful.
It means you were chosen, Klaus.
yes.
well,
He
according
reached
to
out
what
and grabbed you.
when I was talking to Arthur just a few minutes before we started this meeting, it seemed like my life has been directed towards this, and I'm trying to find out why me, what am I supposed to do? I do not know. But my grandfather, maternal grandfather, was a minister, a very loved minister in Denmark, and I loved him a lot. And later on, I became a travel agent, traveled all over the world, and met with many people from different faiths. Lived in homes, in private homes, not in hotels, but in private homes in Japan, in Egypt, India, Jamaica, all over the world. I also lived in hotels sometimes, but stayed with people in their homes. I was not looking for any religion, but I got to know people. I got to know their background. I got to know how they lived. So after many of my travels, many travels to all over the world, I talked to a good friend of mine in Denmark, and I say, oh, by the way, one of my travels, I went to Israel and had a guide taking me around along with some other young people from Denmark. We came to this beautiful gardens in Haifa, and there was this beautiful building with some gold or copper roof on it. And we said, "What is that?" "Oh," he said, "some of you have heard this story before. That's some rich American sect that has those gardens down there." Well, you know what it was, of course. It was Baha'i gardens and the Shrine of the Bab. So anyway, that was interesting. I said, "Well, these crazy Americans, why do they have a temple in Haifa?" So anyway, a few years later, I talked to a friend of mine. I said, both you and I had traveled so much around the world, met so many different kinds of people. Why isn't there something that unites us? Because we have so many things in common. So many things in common. Yes, we are different religion. Yes, we are different nationality, and so forth and so forth. But we have things in common. So many things. He said, there is something we have in common. And I said, so what is that? He said, Baha'i faith. Okay. Baha'i faith. No, not a religion. Come on. Well, he had me hooked. And I read Bill Sears' God Loves Laughter.
Mm.
I was hooked. Then I read Esmond. I was hooked. Oh, and the rest is the history. And then when I saw Abdul Baha in the corner, oh my gosh, that was something else.
Klaus, how old were you at this point?
Carrie, I must have been, let me see, in my mid-20s.
Yeah.
Wow.
I began Baha'i around 1967. I think 67 I began Baha'i.
Yeah. Wow,
Wow.
that's great. What a wonderful story.
Klaus, thank you so much. This
Thank
is exactly what we're looking for. And anyone else want to share anything?
I'd like to hear from Parsas, being Iranians, and how did they,
Yeah.
I mean, they're born into the faith more or less, but I'd like to hear about Parsas.
Parsa, are you up for the challenge?
Maybe she would.
Well, as Klaus said, you know, this is something that I have thought about all my life, and I have shared with my own two daughters, that I have an immense amount of respect, and I'm in awe in the capacity of people that find the faith and become Baha'is. I'm one of those people that it fell on my lap because I was born in a Baha'i family.
Yes.
And my grandparents were Baha'is. And so I really did not have to go through any sort of process because I was raised in the faith. And basically from the time that I could think and feel, I knew that I was going to be a Baha'i. So I learned so much from listening to all these stories. And what a blessing you all have had in your lives to go through this process and to have these experiences. And in many ways, I question myself, would I have ever had the purity of heart, the clarity of conscience, and the intelligence on my own? Would I have been able to recognize the faith?
You would? Yes.
We're thinking you would.
I hope so.
Oh, thank you so much for sharing. So Harbidar, I know that you may have a story to share, or you can wait, whatever your pleasure is.
Oh man, one story. I feel like oh gosh, nothing really but the faith makes sense. I was also born into a Baha'i family, but I've had like a number of like, it really seems like nothing but the faith really makes sense. And but by that I mean like it's kind of it's the faith, like the feeling of the faith. It's like the way the body kind of acknowledges and responds to something that it knows is really good. It's like there's just like this like brilliant intuition that I think just responds to brilliant intuition in other people also. And it's like when I talk to people about how they found the faith or what they love about what they love, it's that same kind of like feels like this desire to be with it's the same. It's like the desire to be with the beloved, and it's like the beauty of search and all these. I feel like everyone is the part of everyone that responds when you recite the writings to them, just like you like a little phrase here and there. They're like, "What did you just say?" And you're like, "Yeah, it's good, right?" And I feel like they respond so much more like with joy than when you say like, "Oh, and that's from my faith. Do you want to join?" And that's been kind of like a hard bounce back, but or kind of like a hard lesson to sort of absorb. But there's a sense of like, oh, I'm not worthy to carry the message of this faith, so I have to tell them that everything that comes out of my mouth is that they like, it must be from the faith. But people have constantly reflected back to me that there is like a station of nobility that we can house if we like are kind of custodians of this light. So I know I speak kind of in the abstract, so that might not have made so much sense, but There's like,
Makes total sense.
It's good.
thanks. Yes.
You're preaching to the choir.
It's a good
Yeah.
start.
Awesome. Yeah.
Well, that's my older daughter, who I'm very proud of.
Ah,
Yeah.
Oh, how wonderful.
That's-
See the resemblance? So much hair,
yeah.
black and white.
That's
I wish I had it.
Exactly. Yeah, yeah. Well, if you'd like, I will share some of my story, and I think you may enjoy it. Most of you, or all of you, perhaps, because you'll recognize some of the faces that I'm going to show you. This we can skip through. So I'll tell you my story. So, of course, many people helped teach me the faith, and Carrie and Murph were among the first that were really important. Going to their weekly firesides was such a,
Yeah.
and just wonderful. And Bob and Marion Hatch and Thomas
Yes.
Varner and William and Margaret and Martin and Olga Fink and Doris Ebert and the Khadems and Jack and Ruth, Larry and Carol and
Yeah.
Carlton RFA and Jane Faley, Jack and Fafa, just, just wonderful. And the list, there's longer list, but that I also have to share. There were also 9 Hands of the Cause that I met.
Yes.
I have special stories about Mr. SEARS and Furutan and KHADEM and several House members, especially Mr. Nachiavani, several phenomenal NSA National Spiritual Assembly, especially Jack McCants, Glenford
Yeah.
Mitchell, Wilma Ellis Brady, Sue Fouts, Franklin Kahn, and a few counselors and board members, especially Jane Faley, and later on Billy Roberts. So all of us people who've been Baha'i for a while, we know these names and they're all very special to us. But if you just on the face of it, if you look at what a community of wonderful souls that is, and I think that was one of the big things that was so important in the early days of the faith. And then I picked up many new friends, my new Baha'i family, and these are names that many of you will know. There's, Beiruz Rouhani and Steve and Joy, Lee and Dell, Jane and Ahmad, Mike, Ralph, Tom Grant, Ellen Smith, Carl Swanson, all these, just
Yeah.
lovely, lovely souls that that I knew, and others too. And those were just the first few years. So I really had quite a community of Baha'is, and I think that was a big thing. And so now for a closer look. So I'll say my story really begins with Seals and Croft, oddly enough. And the reason is that back before I was a Baha'i, and when I was sort of a recovering teenager, not recovering terribly well from a rather traumatic childhood, and I think I put a little bit here. Let's see if I did. I probably did. Yeah, a little bit about that. I had a pretty rough childhood, and so when I was living with foster parents, and I would come home looking for some escape from what seemed like a rather bleak world, and I would put on music on headphones. Headphones back then were big. They were not these small little things. Put on these big headphones and listen to this music of Seals and Croft, just because of the sheer beauty of their harmonies and especially their acoustic music. And it was actually their very first album that I was listening to at that time, that still to this day, it just sends chills down my spine with the just beauty of it. And in a day when, rock and roll was all about sex and wild energy, theirs was not. Theirs was beauty, and it soothed me. And then Jimmy Seal started showing up in my dreams on occasion to sort of offer words of comfort. And I had no idea about their Baha'i faith. And then later on, after I became Baha'i, I discovered they were Baha'is and had a chance to interact with them numerous times, especially Jimmy. And just a lovely short story there. I told Jimmy the story that I just told you. And he said, we were backstage at a concert once, and he told me, he says, Tom, I don't even know how to play the guitar. Abdul Baha teaches me. I said, oh, that's pretty interesting. But he's such a sweet man. He's so self-effacing. And
Yes.
I remember we were in a room with a bunch of reporters, and there were not enough chairs. This happened twice. Uh, and I was a assembly liaison at one point. A bunch of not enough chairs. So he ran out, the star, runs out to get more chairs for the reporter. And
My.
so he's just such a sweet man. And then Dash is just, pure fun and creativity, and got a chance to visit him in his home several times and stuff like that. So there's the beginning
Oh,
of
neat.
my Baha'i story. And then these are the hands of the cause. I think there's one missing, but I've met 9 of them. And
Wow.
if you just look at their faces and their diversity and their countenance, and they just exude sort of wisdom and confidence. And I have many stories that I could tell, and I'm sure you guys too as well. And this is the National Spiritual Assembly, the year I became a Baha'i. And just look at them. I mean, every one of these people, well, with one exception, I know, and mostly because there was a lot of traveling around back in those days. So I had a chance to interact with a number of these people. Glenford Mitchell, certainly, this is Glenford Mitchell, of course. And then Dorothy Nelson, I've been in her home many times. Franklin Kahn, and I don't know if this is Franklin or Chester. I get my Kahns mixed up. Carrie, do you know which one?
Franklin,
I think that's
Franklin, probably.
Yeah, I think that's Franklin too. Yeah. And Franklin, of course, is an American Indian. And I remember it was very sweet. The first time I met him when he was traveling in Atlanta, the first thing he said to a fairly large crowd is that he wanted to officially welcome us to America. As he was the only true American there. So,
Yes.
Don't you forget it.
yeah. So that was just wonderful. And then this is my first local spiritual assembly.
Oh
This,
God, I can't
in case
see
my
it.
daughter has trouble recognizing me, that's me.
There's Gary Jean McDaniel.
Yeah, exactly.
Can't see it.
The hatches.
You can't see it, yeah. And so this is just such a lovely time in my life, and these people, each
Oh,
one of them.
there it is.
Yeah, you see it now? Okay.
Yes.
So they were all big parts of my early life, and in particular, I wanted you to meet Dr. Hatch.
Yes.
Bob was just a beautiful soul. He was noble and wise, and I think most impressive, he was uplifting. He was so just fun to be around. And he was very welcoming, and he was the longtime chair of the local assembly. He was really essential in helping me understand how a Baha'i institution and community could work and how good it could be. He was such a great chair. He had all the wonderful qualities. And every time he would see me, he would come and hug me and call me my baby brother. And he would make me feel welcomed and important and loved. And I just adored him. And so he was great. And this is Mrs.
Sharon.
in the middle. This is Mrs. Gertrude Gillam, and then Sharon, and then Linda on the right. Mrs. Gillam was very important in my Baha'i life. She sort of epitomized a quiet dignity, fortitude, and wisdom that I really appreciated. And I knew anything that she said was truth. And the reason I knew that is that she had been, when I'd met her, she had been Baha'i for 40 years. And when she left her church, which was literally across the street from her house, everyone, including her husband, tried to talk her out of it and continued to talk her out of it for 40 years. And so
Yes.
her faith was deep, and she was just such a serene, noble, inspiring soul. And I don't think I could have become a Baha'i without her, because I trusted her. And she also gave the best answer I ever heard to the question, who is Baha'u'llah? And her answer was, he is who he says he is, and he's even more. And I thought that just nails it. That's
Wow.
that is great. So there's Mrs. Gillam. And then there's Stanwood Cobb. And Stanwood Cobb is, he was a famous educator and certainly in his own right. He was an erudite speaker. He was really amazing, author of a dozen books, A Fountain of Wisdom, A Companion of Abdu'l-Baha, an international travel teacher, certainly. And most importantly for me, he was a conduit of profound mystical knowledge and energy. And I have a story that I think I'll save for when we talk about spiritual confirmations to tell you. I've told it, my kids know this story before, but Stanwood, and I think I've said it here, he cured me of a debilitating illness. It's depression is what it was, with a single touch. And that touch came from Abdu'l-Baha. And in a couple of weeks, I'll tell you that story. But Stanwood, I met him, he was 93 when I met him. And then when he was 97, I invited him to come speak at our university. And I have lots of stories I could tell you about that, but he was sharp as a tack. He was just amazing. So,
You know, he founded the progressive education movement.
that's right. That's right.
Part of it
yeah, which
was
is-
John Dewey.
yeah,
And
which is-
Dewey always gets the credit, but it was Stanwood Cobb. And when Dewey wanted to do things a little differently, Stanwood, you know, stood its ground and said, no,
yeah,
it's now time for me to leave.
yeah, exactly. But he
Oh,
was, he was fun. Carrie, I bet you were there in 1970. I met him in 74, which is when I became Baha'i, because I declared at that, I think it was a winter school in Alabama when we were there, and Stanwood was one of the speakers. And I'll share that story in a little bit. But Stanwood,
I don't remember that.
yeah, it was marvelous. It was just great.
You know, we really had sort of a golden age in Atlanta.
Oh
in this
God,
city.
it was so wonderful, and
Really.
it was just great.
Who's that?
This is Thomas Farner.
Yes,
Yeah, and that's his son Danish.
Dinesh.
And Thomas, in my mind, was, you know, noble and dignified, yet easy to approach and very welcoming. And he had a passionate love of the faith and its writings. And to me, he spoke, and he still does, speak like an Old Testament prophet.
Yes,
Thomas is not your average guy. Thomas is, and if you follow him on Facebook, you'll know exactly what I'm talking about. But he's exactly like an Old Testament prophet. And
Hey, Dad, does he
Yeah.
have a daughter named Baji?
he does indeed. I knew Baji as a kid.
Baji speaks like an
has
Old
a
Testament
Baji?
prophet, and she was a guest speaker at a youth race talks that me and a group of youth threw, and she's got a lot of power in her voice. And I noticed the last name, and I'm like, oh, there's some family connection here.
Well,
No, I think she's Margaret's.
yeah.
She's not Thomas's.
Mercy,
Okay.
Margaret,
Mercy is Thomas's. Yes,
Badgie?
yeah. Oh,
Do
Badge.
they both have a
Mercy.
Badgie?
Actually, now I'm blotting out. I'm not sure.
She's half black also, so I figured there's
Yeah.
probably not too many Baha'i Varners.
Well, there's 3 sons, Varner sons, Thomas, William, and Martin, and they all married white women. And
Mhm.
they all had a number of kids. And you may be right, Karen.
I think she's. I'm on Facebook with her, and I'm pretty sure she's Margaret's daughter, not Thomas's. Thomas had Mercy.
Yeah, you're right. I think you are right. Yeah.
Was Dinesh and
Cool.
Mercy.
Yep. But these kids are just beautiful. So there's Thomas. Oh, and then I didn't tell you this story. Thomas moved in with me when I shortly after I became Baha'i. And I asked him once how you teach the faith. He had a great answer. And with Thomas, it really made sense. He said, it's very easy. When you walk out of the house in the morning, you act like a Baha'i.
Wow.
And that was it. And Thomas really, every breath he took was just infused with Baha'i, energy and spirit and wisdom, just, very deep, profound wisdom. And then there's Benjamin Levy. And
I remember Ben
yeah, he's such an
from
angel.
Florida.
Yes.
Florida.
Well, he was in my mind, he was one of my best examples of self-sacrifice and service. He gave up a lot with the faith. He was a pioneer to Africa and a travel teacher, and he gave up a lot of his career advancement to do that. Not very many people know that, but he was gracious enough to help me figure that out. He spoke French. He was married to a Belgian. And he spoke at several Baha'i events that I went to. But what came across to me with Ben was his sincerity and scholarship. He was so careful in his words and his attitude, and just his whole demeanor was so becoming that you knew that it would be incapable for him to say anything that was not true. He was just such an honest, wonderful soul, the essence of humility and goodness, and then had a beautiful marriage to Francine. And I sort of adopted him as my dad. I'm a kid that grew up without a dad. I mean, I had sort of a dad, but not much of one. And if you'll notice, there's been a lot of men in these presentations, and they were my substitute parents in many ways. Love my mom deeply, of course, but she had her own struggles, but I was in need of some role models. And when I hit the Baha'i community of Atlanta back in the 70s, oh boy, did I hit the gold mine. And it was just wonderful. And he traveled to Atlanta. I invited him to come up to speak at Emory University. And my wife and I, well, she wasn't my wife at that time, but Ming and I were out doing something, and we came back home where Ben was staying with us, and in a very Spartan accommodations. And Ben had cooked a meal for us out of, just stuff he found in the kitchen. And it was a great meal. It was just, but he was just an angel.
You are.
Oh, by the way, that's me, or at least I think that's me.
Now that's how I remember you.
That's right.
I can't see
So
that.
what has changed, Carrie? Not much. All right. This is Hand of the Cause of God, William SEARS.
Mr. Sears.
And he had a big part in my early Baha'i life. He was, of course, a mesmerizing speaker, and his voice had this sort of penetrating quality. It was just magical. He's probably the best storyteller ever. Huge range of emotion, great knowledge, deep faith. And he was clearly a creative and very energetic genius. I mean, he really had it, in spades. Great sense of humor, famous even before he became Baha'i. He was on national network television and radio before that. Author of at least a dozen books about the faith, pioneered to Africa. I was lucky enough to be with him at least 4 times. And he answered my toughest theological question. And I'll tell you, the first time I met him was in Atlanta. He was giving a talk. And after the talk, I came up with my question, which was, I was, immersed in the study of biblical things at that point. And I was standing in line after his talk, and there was about 4 or 5 people in front of me. And so each of those people would, talk with him and stuff like that. When he got to me, he broke precedent of what had happened before. He reached out and grabbed me, and before shaking hands, and then just hugged the bejesus out of me, picked me up off the ground, and then put me back down. And I was, sort of, I was sort of lost in the amazement of it all. But he was just so wonderful. And then after I sort of composed myself, I asked him my question, and he said, Tom, I don't know the answer to that. I've sort of moved on from this. But he answered my question, and the love he gave, and just the power of his, his incredible soul. And oh, what a beautiful, beautiful soul. And then there's ZIKRULLAH KHADEM. And he was really the essence of humility, those of you that knew him. He could not speak of the guardian without crying. he was an intensely emotional man, and I learned a lot about masculinity by watching Mr. KHADEM. If you ever shook hands with him, you also knew that he had a hand like a vice grip, which was surprising because he didn't seem he would, but he did. I picked him up at the airport once in Atlanta and drew him in my old beat up Chevy. This was a 1960 Chevy, and this would have been about 1978. So it was a pretty old Chevy. It had holes in the passenger seat floorboard. And I told him, please don't, be careful, don't put your feet through the hole because it's the ground down there. And he was very sweet. And we chugged on down to Carrollton, Georgia to talk. And
Yeah, high school.
yes, to the Baha'i school indeed. And I had almost 2 hours alone with him.
Oh my gosh.
And then I visited him in Chicago. And then he was so kind. I visited him, and then after we finished, talking and chatting, and I just sort of loving being in his presence, he, instead of saying goodbye at the door, he would walk me to the elevator of his place and, blow me lots of kisses and just treat me like I was gold, which I'm not. But again, it was just, Mr. KHADEM was probably not a great speaker, but he was wonderful if you caught him and just could be with him and just be around and talk with him and listen to him talk. Because man, he was beautiful in that. And I remember in that very first time that I met him when we went to Carrollton, he was scheduled to give a talk on some aspect of the faith. And the first thing he did is ask if there was any people who were just learning about the faith. And there was about 100 and maybe 200 people in the crowd. And there was a couple, and he stopped. He stopped his plan to talk about what he was going to talk about, and he gave a fireside instead. He talked about that, but that's how, and I learned a lot about that, about tending to really what's important. So, and
Beautiful.
this is Jack McCants.
Oh my.
Those of you that know Jack, he was a pioneer and a travel teacher, a National Spiritual Assembly member, a former Methodist minister. He's one of the most brilliant men I know. And when I'm with Jack, which I've been many times, I can rarely finish a sentence because I'm slow and Jack is fast. Jack sees ahead of me about 2 or 3 steps always. So it's very interesting.
You're not slow, Dad.
That's sweet.
You're thoughtful and dreamy and smart and come up with good answers after just the right amount of time and a pause.
Oh,
There you go.
well, I'll pay you later, Sahar. So thank you.
Okay, thanks.
Jack is captivating and fearless and a passionate speaker. And I remember many times being in a crowd of 400 or 500 people, and he was speaking, and in the middle of his talk, he'd break out into a song. He had a great voice. Or several times, I remember once I was sitting in a room, again, there was at least 500 people there. And in the middle of his talk, he calls out my name. And I was like, Jack, what are you doing? But he knew how to connect with an audience. So he was just incredible. Just wonderful. We had deep, deep knowledge of the faith. He's always reading the faith and studying it. Even now, I get probably 2 emails a day from Jack.
Oh wow.
Oh, he's wonderful. And he's always sending me these little humorous things, and he's a great nature lover. So he sends me that stuff as well.
My understanding is, Tom, that he's waiting to go into heart surgery.
That's correct.
Ooh.
And it's supposed to be, I think, this coming week. So yeah, he is. So he loves prayers, and I love saying prayers for Jack. So if you are able to do that, that would be wonderful. He's like 90 years old, guys.
Yeah.
So I went to his 80th birthday, and that was about 10 years ago. So he's
There's a wonderful recording. I haven't heard it in years, but Jack's on it. It's online somewhere. It's a Baha'i series of interviews with people, and Jack is one of them.
Yeah.
And if you can find that, it's like everybody you've ever known has been interviewed. like for an hour. It's really quite good.
If you
I-
find the link, Carrie, will you send it to us?
yeah, I'll research it and try to
Okay.
find.
Yeah, that'd
But
be great.
He
He's
tells it's a wonderful story of how he
and
became.
you know, he's because he was a minister, he sort of appeals to my Christian sensitivities. So his talks are often a little bit like preaching. But oh man, is he a good preacher? So, good. And then there's Jane Faley, and unfortunately, I've looked and I have no picture of Jane, but she's one of the most gifted speakers I've ever heard, because when she told stories, it was such sweetness and delicateness that I didn't think was possible, and it was just completely captivating. It was like, you know, being in a room full of roses or something to listen to Jane. And I remember once I was hearing a talk with her, and I turned to this lady next to me who we were listening to the talk, and the talk was over. And I'd say, well, what did you think of that talk? And she says, I have no idea what she said, but it's the most beautiful thing I've ever heard.
And always she seemed to be smiling. Whatever she was talking, she was smiling all the time.
I know, it was just so wonderful and sweet. And then there's Dizzy Gillespie. Dizzy Gillespie, for those that you don't know, is a world famous trumpet player and composer. And when I say world famous, I mean really world famous. Like every trumpet player in the world knows about Dizzy Gillespie. Universally known. I've heard many radio interviews from famous musicians who talked about being tutored by Dizzy Gillespie. And it just shows you the graciousness of his soul and his help. I picked him up once at the Los Angeles airport, and I'll tell you, this will be my last story, I think, with this. I was worried that I would not recognize him. Because, and I didn't start worrying until I got in the car and got to the airport, and I said, oh geez, what if I miss him? So I'm standing down in baggage claim, back when you could go to baggage claim. I was waiting for Dizzy to make an appearance, and I was quite anxious, and I was walking around, and the plane seems to be a little late maybe, and I've missed him, and so I'm worried like crazy. And then down the walkway comes this guy in coveralls, you know, the jeans that cover and that you used to, you know, pick cotton in and things like that. And then he had a yellow turban on about a foot high, and then a button that was literally that big that says, "Yes, I am famous" on it.
What a kid.
And I figured, oh, that's my man. So, but he was such fun. He was like he dropped out of a comic book. He was just so easy to be with, and being so famous, he was unpretentious and delightful and just incredibly sweet. So,
You know, he's from South Carolina.
yeah, he is. He's from a famous city that has a famous history too, and I blot out on the name of what that history is, but anyway.
He's from Chirac.
Yeah.
C-H-E.
Yeah. So that's my story. And,
that's wonderful.
And those are all the ones from my, you know, early years of the faith. But what a rich, you know, gathering of people, and how much they've really meant to me, and I think to you guys too. And for me, what I learned from all this is that how important community is, and how important, you know, traveling and you know, getting to know people and talking about the faith and sharing it, and, you know, firesides and the way we used to do it and stuff, how significant it was to the growth of the faith. So
in the olden days.
yes. Back when dinosaurs roamed the earth.
One of the things to think about, and I've been thinking about it, I wanted to share it with you guys, ask you input. It seems like since God has given us this time and Zoom, that maybe we could do like Zoom firesides.
Interesting.
You know, to build new communities. Not obviously, it won't be, you know, anything like our youth, but we could certainly talk to people if we could advertise our presence on the internet.
That's awesome. Carrie, if I could, let me mention something in that regard, because I just last week discovered something along these lines. In Los Angeles, there was a famous fireside. I bet you even know about it. The Willows. Do you remember
Oh, yeah.
Maury and Lois Willows?
Sure.
They had a daughter named Christina. And Christina is giving online firesides every Friday night, just like her parents did for about 40 years on the internet. And so I thought, that's great. You know, I'm thinking, you know, of trying to go to that too, but I'll send you guys the link. I found out through Facebook about that, but so yeah, so there's a start.
Maybe we could talk to her and see how she set it up.
Yeah, or just go to one and check it out. But
Also, John Hatcher does a fireside on Wednesday nights down in Florida.
yeah,
You know, John Hatcher, the author and good friend of us. He's from Atlanta, actually.
Who?
John Hatcher.
Oh, yeah.
He has a fireside on Wednesday nights at, I think it's at 7 or 8.
Yeah.
And of course it's open. Anybody could go.
Let me ask you guys, because some of my old Atlanta friends are here, especially Carrie and Karen, if you guys remember, you know, Mrs. Gillam, who is so important in me becoming a Baha'i, she became Baha'i because she worked for a Baha'i lady. But I've been trying for years to figure out who that Baha'i lady was. She like cleaned house or did some little odd jobs for her, things like that. Do you guys know by any chance who that was?
I don't know.
No, I wasn't in Atlanta. I remember Olga Fink and
Yes.
Doris?
yes, Doris. But
Doris, Olga, yeah.
Yes.
and I'm still in touch with Miriam Hatch on Facebook, but I can't imagine who that was. I didn't know a lot about the Atlanta community.
Yeah.
We were in North DeKalb.
Right.
Yeah.
Excellent. Well, guys,
This has been great. I miss you guys so much.
It's been a fun hour. William, we've missed you. You want to share anything? Oh, you're muted. You're muted.
That's what I was saying. I'll take myself off mute for starters. Nothing really to share today. I was just thinking about some of the significant people of my Baha'i experience, which began in the greater Phoenix and Scottsdale areas. I declared about almost 20 years ago. And just some of the very sweet, dear people, some of whom are no longer with us. Avid Navidi, she was of the Phoenix community. John Duga, he's still around.
John.
Yes, John Duga, very dear friend. And Hosro Nafisi, Nafis Samandri, Omid Motahed, Kevin Parsi, and there's three others, I believe. Like the entire community, they reflected just absolutely just wonderful people.
Did you ever know the Thurs, William, in Scottsdale? The Thurs?
No.
House in Scottsdale.
Sound.
But Don Streets also, Don and Ruhi were also quite instrumental in many ways. But of note, and with love and kindness and great humor and tongue in cheek, the very first fireside I was ever invited to was only after I declared Baha'i. I said, what is this fireside thing everybody keeps talking about? They did, well, don't you know? I go, I have no clue what you're talking about. I was a non-fireside to start with. So, but I've held many myself, and I've attended many, of course, since then. But I find it interesting, and that the surprise that everyone had with, well, you haven't been to one? I go, no, because nobody asked. And that's such a part of those who are new to the faith most often is we are asked. And that's really all it takes.
Excellent.
Yeah.
I'm so lucky. William is in my Baha'i community here. He's actually in La Jolla, but just a lovely gift to have.
Oh man.
Tom, a question I have for
Oh my
you.
gosh, I was
Of the friends of Atlanta that you had listed as you helped them teach the faith, did I miss that you had not listed Tom Hanks? Because I believe you taught him and you were roommate with him for a while.
With who?
Tom Hanks.
Oh, yeah.
Tom Harris?
No, Tom Hanks.
I remember Tom
Hand.
Hanks.
Yes. Tom Hand, right?
Yes.
Yes.
Oh, I know Tom. Yes, of
And
course.
that's what I'm saying, but I didn't see you when you listed the friends that you taught the faith.
Oh, yeah. Oh, Tom is such a lovely person. And I had a small hand in him becoming Baha'i. And then, of course, he went off to Israel, you know, and worked in Israel for quite a while. I think he's up in Massachusetts now. But what a lovely soul. Oh,
He was one of the Decatur boys.
Exactly.
Was
Yeah, he
he?
was in our LSA.
yeah, just an angel, just an angel. So, yeah.
And do you know where Carl Swanson is now?
Oh, gosh.
I remember
Carl
Carl.
was somewhere in the Pacific. And I'm trying to remember where. He pioneered to some island, and I'd mess it up if I said, but he was on a couple of different islands. I'm not sure which one he did. He was teaching at a university there last I knew, but I don't know. I mean, I'm close to retirement now, and he's a little older than I, so you know, I'm suspect he's retired.
Didn't he go to Hong Kong one time to teach?
It could be, yeah.
Or Kowloon?
Yeah, he was on teaching at some island that had a big U.S. Army Navy base in the Pacific, but then there's quite a few islands that are like that out there. So yeah, what a lovely guy Carl is. Oh, geez, just
Remember him?
yeah, just. Oh, you want to hear one more story? Yeah.
Yes.
All right, this is a good one. This is the story of in part. How I met my wife. So I had a friend. I met some Chinese guy, and who was a student at Emory University. And I met him because he came up to me and acted as if he knew me, but I had never met him before. And I didn't know who he was, but he was quite friendly, and I didn't want to tell him I don't know who you are. So I was sort of playing along with it. and he knew my future wife, Ming. And so what happened is that I was able through him to get to arrange some study sessions with Ming, which led in about 2 weeks' time to an engagement. And so I was very happy that this Chinese guy had made this connection. Later on, this Chinese guy, whose name is Naisu, by the way, Naisu Zhu, became my roommate while Ming and I were waiting for parental consent, which was a while. He moved in with me, and we were just a beautiful guy. And at some point, Carl Swanson came over to visit. And Naisu almost dropped his jaw because Naisu thought when he met me that I was Carl Swanson. Now, Carl is about 6'4"
with red hair.
Has red curly hair and a big beard. And I am not 6'4". I don't have red hair. But that is the spiritual connection. He thought I was Carl Swanson. And that's how we got connected. So go figure it out, will you? So when you know, Klaus and others talk about these spiritual connections that bring us to where we are, I understand very well what they're talking about. So, very good. Well, dear friends, I guess I'll leave you, but thank you so much for coming. You know, spread the word for anyone that wants to come. We'll I guess continue. I know here this week we're also competing with another cluster reflection meeting, which is unfortunate, but it is what it is.
Can I put forth a request for the like the Glory Day Baha'is who were around in the like 80s doing Europe champion stuff. I don't even really, I put in our calendar that we have Sahar's dad's fireside today, and then you're like, this is not a fireside, and I'm like, heck. So if y'all know what firesides are, can you like have like tutorials on what makes this different than a fireside? Because I was like, it's a fireside. I'm like, okay.
Oh, well, look, you've got the world's
Hospitality.
best answerer right here in my upper left corner. Carrie can tell you.
Well, a fireside is a warm and generous and loving gathering, but its focus is on the seeker, on teaching the faith for those who don't know, who would like to know. And it's been my honor and privilege to be able to have firesides, a great part of my Baha'i life. And I don't want to stop doing it just because we have COVID. So there has to be a way that, you know, we can extend ourselves and do this new medium. But a fireside is for the seeker. But in the process of that, the Baha'is who come and help teach also fall in love with each other. So the fireside is a wonderful deepening tool, a vehicle. And that's what we did in Georgia back in the day, in the early 70s. It just kind of exploded because all these people just happened to move in at the same time. And we were young, and we were all on fire, the Millers and the Gilbos and just these incredible people, on and on and on, and the Varners, of course. But Shoghi Effendi really, you know, talks about the fireside, and it should be, in my view, a basic institution of any community, because there has to be a means by which people who want to know can find out. Of course, there are all kinds of ways to teach, don't misunderstand me, but the fireside is so powerful for the community that young Baha'is come, they learn to teach there, they lose their fear. You know, you can gradually help them express themselves, and then they learn, and then they want to read. So it expands to be something that you just wouldn't want to miss. And that's what we had in Phoenix in 1970.
The element of hospitality
Mhm.
was,
Yeah.
yeah.
And there's all the teachings about the faith that you've read and experienced, all of that comes together in a good fireside. That there's good food, there's good energy. It can be simple, it can be elaborate, but it's the spirit of service and love to the people who come through that door is what we're asked to do. And of course, it's so easy and fun and wonderful. But deepening is a bit different. I mean, a fireside is to serve the seeker, the bottom line, which is why I think Anna the KHADEM, when he realized there were seekers, he stopped everything and taught the seeker.
Yes.
That as a good host or hostess, you don't want the fireside to get in a place where it shouldn't be going.
Yeah.
And so you have to make sure that spirit of service to the seekers is there. Whatever else the people, but every Baha'i grows by going to firesides, I think. And
Good.
Well, I think it was mostly also the element of bringing someone into your home and extending hospitality that was the emphasis. Besides the teaching, was bringing someone into your home, even if the Baha'i faith isn't mentioned, that showing that hospitality and making them feel welcome was very much an emphasis.
That's right. And part of it is listening, to not so much have a canned speech that you're going to give,
Yes.
but to find out gently and lovingly, what does
I
the
can help.
seeker want to know about, you know? And it might be completely different than what you had planned. I mean, there could be a general kind of overview, but it's that intimacy that creates the love and the enrollment, you know.
Yes.
Ultimately, it's love and knowledge. But too often sometimes I'll go to a fireside and it's clear that the people aren't listening to the seeker.
Mhm.
They're trying to perfect their performance, which is that's a mistake.
Yeah.
You're there for the seeker, and really the seeker will ask you for what he needs if you allow it, you know, and can respond in a way. And of course, you can carry it to any number of places, but you have to check back all the time. Do I have my seeker with me? So that you don't just start talking, you know, and never stop. But that's I think what attracts people to the faith and what we're supposed to do. I think there's some place where Shirley maybe says something like that, you know, give the seeker what he needs, and not what you want to say. And so once that happens, then the seeker's comfortable, you're comfortable, and the seeker's going to come back. And too often people don't come back. Well, sometimes it's because people wanted to give a talk rather than serve the needs of these people.
So our topic next time is the practice of becoming a Baha'i. And so Firesides is, you know, certainly part of that. So we can also pick up and talk more about that, and, you know, prayer and all the other things that we've sort of experienced. And I'm going to give you guys a carrot for coming next week or next month. You guys know who Christina Frith is? Christina, those of you that went to the Wisconsin Baha'i Conference some years back may remember a dramatic moment in the evening when this lady came forth on stage to music and sang this incredible version of Baha'i prayer. That's Christina. And Christina's a friend, and she wanted to come today, but had some conflict at the last minute. But she wanted to come and sing a song about her spiritual teachers. And so that will probably happen next time. So there's an incentive for you guys to come, because she has a voice that we can only dream about.
Oh boy.
There you go. Okay, guys, well, so lovely to see you. So I'll send you that link and stuff, and I love you all.
Love you too, Mom. This has been wonderful.
Thank you.
Klaus.
Thank you. Good to see you all.
Yes,
Take
indeed.
care of you all.
Hello.